Hello and welcome to the Elder Tree podcast. My name is Twiggy Dawn. I'm the founder of the Elder Tree and Alchemilla Herbals, and I reside on Jitterbug land here in far north Queensland. You are listening to the Herbal Education segment, where each new moon I invite a myriad of plant wisdom keepers to chat about the world of herbal education, about their passions and motivations, and their dreams for the future of herbal medicine education in Australia. This podcast is brought to you by the Elder Tree, a non-for-profit organisation whose mission is putting the medicine in the hands of the people. One of the ways that we are doing this is through this podcast. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey while supporting the Elder Tree for as little as $2 per week, then you can become a member of our Patreon. Thanks to all of the people and plants who have helped to make this podcast possible. Miriam Latif, the passionate and rebellious visionary behind the Root Network and Understory, shares her stories and wisdom with us in today's episode. Miriam resides on Bunurung and Wurundjuri land in Melbourne and is a herbal practitioner, mentor, and mother. In this interview, Miriam firstly shares her journey of her herbal education, getting her herbal qualification before doing a 3-year apprenticeship with Jimi Wollumbin. And she then shares about the Root Network, which is an online underground practitioner collective for qualified herbalists, naturopaths, and nutritionists that's been created to empower and unite the community while giving a space to critique the modern wellness industry and explore creative solutions to change the current wellness paradigm. Miriam shares about this wonderful, adaptive, and evolving space and her dedication to the collective growth within the community. We discuss relationships within ourselves and the world around us. We talk about the importance of cultural stories, bringing the sacred into the material world, and dissolving the illusion that most of the world is inanimate. Miriam is a rebel with a cause and is passionate about stimulating positive change, a change that will benefit all. So check out her offerings online and get involved in the conversation. Hi, Miriam. Welcome back to the Elder Tree podcast. It's so good to have you here today. Thanks for coming on to the Herbal Education segment, having a chat with me.
No worries. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, I know that Steph had a great chat with you last time. And so for any of our listeners who didn't hear that, they might like to go and listen to that that episode. It was a really great chat you had there with Steph. But today, being the Herbal Education segment, I would really love to hear a bit about your history with herbal medicine and, what's led you to where you are now, and particularly your the educational aspects of your history, if you feel to share with us.
Yeah, awesome. So I first started to get interested in herbal medicine when I was living in a tiny little, extremely dilapidated little shack on a mountain on the Sunshine Coast. And what drew me to herbal medicine was this idea of self-sufficiency. And I think self-sufficiency is a bit of a funny word because, you are in relationship with the plants and other people, and there's really no such thing as self-sufficiency, but you get the idea. I really wanted to have the skills. We were quite isolated, we were in the bush, and I just wanted the skills to be able to tend to myself, to my health, if I was ill, if anyone I knew was ill, from a place of not knowing what was around me and what I had access to and what I could make and all this kind of stuff. And that led me to studying herbal medicine, an advanced diploma of Western herbal medicine at ACNT, and that was mainly online. And sometimes I would jump down to Brisbane, and that took me a long time to get through, 5 or 6 years, I'm pretty sure, by the time I finished it, because I did it pretty slowly, and had breaks here and there. And I found, as I think so many people find during their studies of herbal medicine inside an institution, that it was so dry and it was so reductive, and so much of the magic I felt being surrounded by plants in the middle of the bush on top of this mountain was just completely absent during my degree. And that left me with a really big craving for more. I knew there was more. I knew there was more juice. I knew there was more kind of magic and awe and wonder to herbal medicine than how it was being taught inside university. Um, I studied Zentai Shiatsu for a little while, and that's when I came across traditional Chinese medicine. And that really started to scratch that itch for me because it was poetic, it described systems, it was a relational system, it was an ecological sort of system. Um, it spoke to like the broad patterns that we see inside the body rather than the tiny little sort of cellular lesions, which is the way that we kind of study herbal medicine inside university, right? Very like detailed and small and reductive. Whereas this was like patterns and relationships and much more reflective of the way that I sort of intuitively understood the body and the things I was observing and the ways that I intuitively understood plants and their application. Um, but there were some parts of traditional Chinese medicine that just felt foreign, because it is effectively foreign. It's an Eastern tradition, and although a lot of it made sense, it still wasn't like hitting that thing that I was searching for that I couldn't even like quite name. um, and that led
Yeah.
me to reaching out to different people, reading different books. um, One amazing book that I came across was a herbal called The Energetics of Western Herbalism by Peter Holmes. And Peter Holmes kind of merged traditional Chinese medicine lens with Ayurveda, but with Western herbal medicine as the tradition comes from like the Galenic and Hippocratic and Greek tradition, which of course is, influenced by Eastern medicine as well. And it's all a big melting pot. But that was the first time I really came across like Western traditional medicine. And I was like, oh, that feels like, it's satisfying whatever this kind of desire or urge it is that I have. And I reached out to a fellow called
Mm.
Jimi Wollumbin, whose work I was following on Facebook at the time, back in the days when it was like Facebook before Instagram. And, one thing led to another. And eventually I got to have the amazing honor and privilege of becoming his apprentice. And I did that for 3 years post graduating. I moved from the Sunshine Coast down to the Northern Rivers in order to be able to do that. And I got a very intimate and intense and wonderful and wild apprenticeship into the myth and the law and the art of traditional Western herbal medicine, Hippocratic medicine, humoral medicine. But, one of the things that he really taught me was the context of the medicine that we practice and the way that culture affects and defines the medicine that we practice. And so I, we didn't talk about a single herb till about 1 year into the apprenticeship, because all that initial part was becoming really, really familiar with the history and the myth and the story of ancient Greece, where the system of medicine was like formalized, so that I could understand the medicine, right? In order to understand the medicine, you have to understand the context around it. So I was really immersed in a lot of ancient Greek myth and story and symbolism, and it really blew my mind. It really blew my mind, and it definitely scratched that itch for the mystery and the magic and all of that. And I would say really primed me for systems thinking, because traditional medicine is really about relational thinking, relational understanding of the world, a different mode of perception, right? When you're looking at the world, because I guess modernity has sliced and fractured and fragmented the world in so many different separate pieces. And in order to practice traditional medicine, you
Mm.
really have to be able to see the threads and the connections between what we've deemed as separate. You really do have to step into a completely different mode of perception. So yeah, it really primed me for systems thinking and relational thinking. And I'll always be ever grateful to Jimi for helping me to be able to step into a different way of seeing the world.
Oh, beautiful. What a great opportunity.
Mhm.
Jimmy's been interviewed on this show, a few times, I
Yeah.
think maybe even 3 times now. And
Mhm.
yeah, he's definitely got a really amazing perspective on things
Mhm.
that's, going down to the roots of traditional traditional Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's right around the corner for me. I should probably actually spend a bit more time with him. But yeah, what a journey. So then, what's the initial thing then that's like sparked the Root Network? So, you entered into your own clinical practice first, or
Mm-hmm.
how did we end up creating this beautiful offering?
Yeah. So while I was apprenticing with Jimmy, I started seeing people in the Northern Rivers. I was working at Nimbin Apothecary as well. And so I would see people out the back of the apothecary, and that was a wonderful way to be a part of the community there. And then I left Nimbin to move down to Melbourne to have my daughter, and motherhood took over, of course, like as it does. And I put all that stuff aside to be a mum. And gosh, where do I begin? I suppose in those late night breastfeeding hours where you're up at like 2 or 3 in the morning just holding your baby, I don't know. I guess I had like a lot of time to think. And I also think, like, for me anyway, when I became a mum, you just don't have time for any bullshit. And you don't have time for anything that isn't like absolutely necessary. And I guess through that process, I just reflected a lot about wellness, about health, about the narratives we had about what it means to be healthy and well. I think also, like, when you become a mom, I don't think there's any other sort of, I don't know what you call it, mode where you are asked to hold like conflicting feelings all at the same time. And I suppose being like thrust into that zone also helped me get a bit more nuance around some of the stories that I had previously held around what it meant to be healthy and well. And so, yeah, in those late night breastfeeding hours and just my general pondering and meandering brain, that is kind of inclined towards seeing like the big picture anyway. I've kind of like always been that way. I started to feel like I said before, some of the stories that I had about health and wellness and healing were quite binary. And I started to realize that that was kind of what defined wellness culture, or industrialized wellness as we kind of see it today. And I started to kind of talk about that a bit publicly, not necessarily online, but to like friends and colleagues who are also in the industry, who are also practicing herbal medicine or nutrition or naturopathy, and had also started to notice some of these threads, right? And I'm a firm believer of um, the idea that critiquing wellness culture is important in order to make it better. And I think sometimes online people see me critiquing wellness culture and think that I'm just there to tear down wellness culture, which I am absolutely not. I'm like here to make it better, right? Because I do think it is missing a really big degree of criticality. And I also think that needs to come from inside the industry. Like, wellness culture critique has become pretty popular lately. There are a lot of people talking about it, but I don't see heaps of people talking about it from within the industry. And I do think that's where we have the power to change it. So back to the Root Network, started talking to people. People were like, yeah, I agree. And let's like have conversations about this. And where's the nuance, and where's the texture, and where's the context for all these things that we are saying are great, and do this and get all these results and whatever. And so that's why I created the Root Network, to kind of gather people who are inside the wellness industry, who are practicing inside it, but also at the same time had these conflicts about it, but there wasn't really a space to explore those conflicts and those contradictions. There wasn't really a space to be like, yes, I work inside this industry. I love my plants. I love my practice. I love my craft, but there's some things that I'm seeing that I'm not entirely comfortable with. I'm not sure how to articulate that. And I would love to get together with some people in order to explore that, at the same time as doing cool stuff. Like, let's hang out and like compare case notes. Let's hang out and talk about like what plants we're loving at the moment. Let's ask each other medicine making questions, right? There's this, again, it's that binary thing of like, oh, well, if you're critiquing it, then you can't participate in it. So it's a place where we get to do both, and we get to hold that conflict and contradiction as a community, as a collective, and have the hard conversations so that we can maybe tend to some of these problems that we see inside wellness culture whilst doing what we love. I think also, like, we graduate, we start practicing, and it's extremely isolating. Suddenly we're in these four-walled clinics, you know, and we're not really like talking to
Mm-hmm.
each other or cross-pollinating. And like, this work is meant to be done collaboratively and collectively. Like, there, from the growing of the medicine to the making of it to all the way to like the super clinical, the spectrum is massive, and different people tend to different things. And so, like, let's just like all hang out together and all do our bit. And that is how we be in better service to ourselves and to the people that we walk and work with as well. So yeah, it's also a place where it's like, okay, you've finished studying, you're out there like on your own. Why? Why? Let's hang out. Let's like make it easier for each other. Let's have conversations. Let's compare case notes, all of that.
Mm. Beautiful. So yeah, the Root Network is like online space that
Mm,
is for like, building community among herbal practitioners and helping them to support one another and also ask big questions,
exactly.
to question the status quo
Hmm.
on wellness and not just kind of fit into whatever box they've been trained into to
Exactly.
support each other to think for themselves and
Yeah, totally. I went into like a big detailed rant. Yeah, like top line thing is that, yeah, it's an online underground practitioner collective for qualified herbalists, naturopaths, and nutritionists. Not that I have anything against folk medicine
yeah.
or folk herbalists, but it goes back to that point that, like, if we really want to change the wellness industry, I do think it's important that we start a movement from within the industry of people who are like qualified. Um, because it kind of, the resistance comes from there a little bit. Like, folk herbalists are onto it. Do you know what I mean? Like, we get it. We have that relational systems understanding view of things. But I think
Mm.
there's this sense that there can be a resistance when we get like super professional, air quotes here, and super clinical. And so that's where I saw the gap, and that's where I really wanted to like create a community specifically around that. So yeah, it's an online underground practitioner collective, qualified herbalists, naturopaths, and nutritionists. We hang out, we have big convos, we do clinical stuff, and we support each other.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
How long have you been going for now? When were you formed?
July last year or June last year, so about a year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah, about a year and a half. And I think we have 38 amazing members in there at the moment. People ranging, of course, like qualified herbalists, nats, and nutritionists, but also people who are really into like medicine making, who are really into phytochemistry, who are really into community and collective health. We have people with like social work backgrounds in there. There's such an awesome, diverse range of really passionate, interesting people. There's such a great community culture in there. We have like a forum where if anyone ever asks a question, like, you're always guaranteed to get a response. It's a very supportive network, and I'm super proud of everybody in there, and the quality and caliber of people in there. It's very much my happy place. I feel very supported by it. Yes, I facilitate it, but one
Mm.
thing that I say is like, I'm not like,
Hmm.
we really try to like dismantle hierarchies in there, and that's why it's called the root network, because it's that biomimicry thing of like a mycelial network, right? There's no center. And I am not the center or at the top. It's just everybody supporting each other. And I learn so much from everybody in there. And I'm in there like asking heaps of questions as well. And um, yeah, we really do try and base it off the principles of a mycelial network. So, like, open sourced, resource sharing, always exchanging, no hierarchies, adaptable, flexible, responsive. These are the principles that we really try to live by in there and abide by, and are guided by. And what was the other thing that I just had in my brain that I wanted to say? I can't remember. It might come to me later.
Yeah, that's beautiful space that you're creating there, and yeah, and of course you should be receiving from the space, and often, visionaries, people that get driven to want to create a change, or to fill a gap, or to provide a service. It's obviously often they have that need themselves first, like, why
Yeah.
isn't this out there? I need this. All right, no one else is creating it. I'm just going to get up and do it now. So good on you for like, yeah, not just sitting there and wishing something would change. You've done everything that it's taken to create this platform and to create these spaces for people. So yeah, that's wonderful. And then wonderful that you can then benefit from that as well. You're not only helping other people, but you're also getting that need met for
Yeah.
yourself as well, to be within the kind of community that you want to be in.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's always like I feel like this year I've learned that it's okay to like experiment a lot. I feel like when we start things, we feel like we have to get it right from the start and then it has to be like consistently perfect, you know? And again, it's the principles of that
Mm.
mycelial network to be like flexible and adaptive and changeable. And yeah, it is an experiment. It's really responsive to the needs of people in there. I'm like very curious about like how I can structure it in a way that when it grows, everybody else in there grows as well. That's something that I'm really kind of
Mm.
thinking about and working on at the moment. Yeah, I think sometimes business can be structured in a way where, like, and also like it's the cultural narrative, right? Like, grow, 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 exponential growth. And while growth is super important, I,
Well,
I don't just want to grow individually. I really, really want it to be a place where the network's growth is about the growth of everybody else in there. And I don't exactly know how to execute that and what that's going to look like, but I think like fronting up to that concept and getting curious about that concept and what that might look like inside that space, I don't know, that really interests me, and I'm really, really passionate about the growth, the collective growth of everybody in there.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's like that's how our community should
Yeah,
be functioning. It's how
exactly.
businesses should be functioning, families, communities.
Yeah.
Is that kind of that idea that we all grow together, and we make decisions that benefit everyone.
Hmm.
We make decisions as a collective for the collective,
Hmm.
and that yeah, slow growth, mindful growth,
Hmm.
that like growing to respond to the need of the collective.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's beautiful. It's like it's a whole kind of paradigm shift, and if you can create those like small spaces where people can all get together and be part of that paradigm shift, then that can kind of ripple out,
Hmm.
to the larger collective. So it's,
Yes. Yes.
it's not a small thing you're doing.
Yeah, and that's actually just like triggered what I forgot, like what I couldn't remember to say before. It's like the way that we try to relate to each other and what we do inside the Root Network. I hope that it's like a little microcosm, like you say, and then that the way that we get to practice to relate to each other inside that space can ripple out beyond that. So yeah, a little microcosm, I feel like, for the collective and cultural shifts that I feel like we need to make on a larger scale in order to be well in like the truest
Mm.
and deepest sense of the word.
Mm. Yeah, it's really wonderful. I can really relate across to the elder tree, those certain aspects where, we've written up all these different documents about the cultural paradigm shift that we want to be part of, and what it means to be within the elder tree space, and the
Hmm.
kind of the mindsets and the ways that that we function together as a collective, and then also having the sociocracy training every
Yes.
year to have that like non-hierarchical,
Yep.
balanced, fair, inclusive, but efficient decision making,
Hmm.
practices, and all of that. So yeah, it's nice to get to talk to somebody who's doing that in, creating that in their own different space as well. So
Yeah, trying.
yeah, it's really good, and it's I know that something that yeah. Well, it's a work in progress. So
Exactly.
you've been a year and a half, and it will continue to grow and evolve.
Mhm.
And, who knows? I mean, do you have like a picture of where,
Mm.
where you're headed, maybe like as a collective, where you could be in a year or 5 years, or, are there
Mm.
discussions around that, like where you might want it to lead?
Mm.
Or are you just happy like with where it's at,
I
with,
I have little ideas, but in terms of like a big grand vision, I don't have anything quite defined yet. I love this idea of like the emergent properties of
Mhm.
complex systems, and I see the root network as a
Yeah.
complex system, and what will emerge. So we'll see.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and that's something that you were talking to me earlier before we started the interview about, relation and systems and like relationships and our relationship within ourselves and to others and to the world around us. And
Mm.
yeah, I just want to kind of open up the space for you to share a bit about your perspective around that because I'd love to hear it.
Mm. I mean, I think what comes up immediately when you say that is this idea. And if we were to like kind of circle back to like kind of my critiques of wellness culture, and probably one of my biggest critiques of wellness culture is that it sees the body in a vacuum, in like isolation, and if you just take this and you do this, then you will be well, without acknowledging that our bodies exist inside systems, and systems have a profound impact on our health and on our bodies. And it's a tricky one. And there's lots of nuance there because, like, it's not like we can wave a magic wand and change those big picture systems that we live in, like capitalism, for example, or the patriarchy, which have profound impacts on
Mm-hmm.
our system, right? And I guess what I would love to see in wellness culture in terms of like relational thinking and systems thinking is at the very least acknowledging and including in our story of what it means to be well the impact of those systems. So when I talk about systems thinking and when I talk about a relational view of the world, that's a part of it. And then I think another part of it is something that really came alive for me when I started learning traditional medicine is like the living and breathing animacy of the world. And now, at some point, during the Enlightenment, we completely abstracted all the animacy out of the material, and then the abstract became the sort of
Mm.
animacy, went to up into the heavens and to God and into this kind of like untouchable thing. And the things that we could actually touch and speak to and smell and hear, they all became like inanimate. And so when I talk about a relational view, and when I
Mm.
talk, and then this is why it also relates to like the stories inside our culture and our cultural health and our cosmologies. It's like I truly believe that for cultural and collective health, we need to bring the sacred back into the material world so that we can have a relationship again with the material world. I mean, it always has been animate, and it remains animate. It's just our
Mm.
our view of it and the modes of perception that we are currently occupying. But I do think for our collective and cultural health, we need to remember our relationship with the living, breathing, animate world around us, and the stones and the waterfalls and the plants and the herbs and all of the beauty and again wellness in the truest and deepest sense of the word, that can come out of that stepping into relationship with the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah, can totally relate to that. That's really well put. It's that, kind of this disconnect that happens when we like isolate things, isolate compounds or isolate
Hmm.
objects and kind of have this separation and see that compound or that object or, as things that are, yeah, lifeless, that are just
Hmm.
objects that we can own or that we're separate from. And
Hmm.
there's so many like traditional cultures. It's like they believe that the wind is alive, like
Hmm.
the mountain is alive. And even in Native American culture, it's like the mountain isn't just alive, it's actually my relative, it's
Hmm.
my uncle, and
Hmm.
that river is actually my sister.
Hmm.
Like it's not just the alive, it is I'm related to you. And then because we're family, then I'm responsible for you, and we're responsible for each other. And it's
Hmm.
beyond just a custodianship thing of like I should be obliged to care for you so that you can keep giving to my grandchildren. It's like this sense of like, no, we're family, so we
Hmm.
actually like take care of one another, and that's what we do in that relational kind of understanding that I really relate to, but is, yeah, definitely sorely missing from the modern mindset. But
Totally.
I really feel like that's shifting. It's like a slow thing, but I feel like there are shifts happening around that. There's enough people getting up on their soapbox or on their
Mhm.
podcasts or on their, social media channels that, I think there's a lot of more people out there waking up to the possibility, waking, reawakening to this than what there was, even 10 years ago or 50 or 100 years ago or something.
Yeah, I think it's such like a basic, an innate human need that inevitably we will go back there at some point. I hope. I think like, again, when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about our stories about what it means to be well, I think wellness has this very narrow focus. It's like, even, I love my herbs, but wellness isn't all about like taking your herbs and doing your ice baths and eating all the right things. Like if we're talking like big picture wellness, like what feeds us, what are our primary human needs, it is to be in relationship. Like we can't we can't, no man is an
Absolutely.
island, and someone in the Root Network
Mm.
said this beautiful phrase, which is like to stitch ourselves back in, like for better or worse, we need to be stitched firstly
Mm.
back into the systems that or stitched back into an acknowledgement that broader systems affect our health, because that means then firstly that we stop focusing on the individual and we start tending towards the bigger systems at play, which means helping to make a fair and just world for everybody on this planet. So that's health with a capital H as well. And again, stitching ourselves back in with a living, breathing, animate world, which really feeds that very deep human need that I think is impossible to be really healthy without.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, like, how do you see that happening? Like, how can we be stitched back in or rewoven back into a tapestry, or like I love
Mm,
the stitching visual as well. But like, because it's kind of denotes that there's like, total separation
mhm,
that's being brought back together again.
mm,
But like, does that look like maybe not buying your vegetables wrapped in plastic, more like going to the source and letting decisions you make be part of the, like, looking at the patternings of like where your medicine comes from and being more connected to where your medicine's coming from and where it's going, and seeing, like, zooming out and having
mm,
that, like you say, what is quite a natural thing you have of the bird's eye view, being able to
mm,
zoom out and see the bigger picture, like,
mm.
and looking at where are things coming into your life, where are they leaving, like what is my relationship to those around me, what's my relationship to my phone or my car or my, like, what, I'm throwing some ideas out there,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
what,
It's a good
what do you
question.
feel like are some steps for people to
Mm,
yeah.
mm. Well, like, I think the first thing I want to say is like, it's kind of like what I was saying before. Like, we were always in relationship, but this separation is like, it's just an illusion of separation. It's not an actual separation because, of course, we are
Mm,
inevitably in relationship with everything around us. Everything is affecting everything all the time. It's a complex
mm-hmm,
system, right? So it's an illusion of separation. And because it's an illusion of
yeah.
separation, actually, the most fundamental and important thing, anyway, for me, because this is what I'm fascinated with, is stories. And if we can shift the narratives, if we can shift the big picture stories that define how we see the world and define our illusions and our delusions, then for me, that is the best way of stitching ourselves back in. What are the cosmologies? What are the big narratives that are telling us like who we are and how we relate to the world around us? And that's why, again, circling back, it was so important for me to learn all the myth and lore and stories of traditional Western medicine, because that actually kind of inoculated me into a mode of perception where that kind of illusion of separation dissipated, because the modern stories that we have
Mm,
are stories that enforce that illusion. Right? These are the stories of modernity, like the
mm-hmm,
meritocracy, for example, that if you work hard, then you'll come out on top. Like that's one shitty narrative that, you know, enforces that illusion of separation, or that like that stone is not alive and you cannot hear it speak, Whereas if we go back and we look into the old stories, whether they're of your lineage or whether that they're not, you all those stories, the world is alive and animate and speaking to people, all those stories, especially like Greek tragedy and Greek myth, um, you know, there's a web that is woven of like action and consequence. Things are very non-linear, there's no kind of origin and end point. These stories that communicate ideas about, the fact that time and life is cyclical and not linear, that linear trajectory and linear story is another thing that keeps us separate from everything else. So stories, where stones can speak and gods can turn into, bay laurel trees and all that remind us that we are connected, that things are cyclical, that the world is alive. So yeah, when we talk about stitching ourselves back in, and that's why, my page on Instagram is called Understory, because for me anyway, nothing is more profound in terms of changing how we relate to each other and the world than story.
Yeah, beautiful. I was just in a workshop last week, was teaching my students about the Oracle of Delphi
Yeah,
and the
cool.
the Greek
Mm.
the stories around the bay laurel and how
Mm.
she'd achieve her visionary states
Mhm.
with the bay laurel, and I've actually worked with bay in that way. It's a pretty
Amazing.
powerful herb actually that's just kind of overlooked
Right?
as a
Yes, it
culinary herb,
is.
but
It
it's actually an
is.
incredible
Totally.
visionary divinatory dream herb.
Beautiful. Yeah, and
For anyone listening to that, just like carefully, carefully, like careful how much you have, because if you're like me and you go in gung ho and take a giant big whiff of the smoke and chuck a branch under your pillow, then you
yeah,
just
wow.
buckle up.
But isn't it,
Don't do that. I don't
when you're
recommend it. It's
telling
pretty
the
full on.
when you're telling the story, like how much more alive does it make it come? Like how much more are you stitched in then with that plant
Yeah.
just via the transmission of that story?
Mm.
I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the biggest tragedies of modernity is the loss of those integrated narratives that are so much more beautiful and complex and rich and poetic than any of the stories that are guiding us today. And of course, we don't know those stories are guiding us, these stories that tell us it's just you're alone, you work hard, you get to the
Yeah.
top. So yeah, I'm a really big fan of story.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's and like we're lucky. There's a lot of documented stories. There's people's individual life stories that you can tune in with and learn from. But like historically, culturally, there's so many written stories that we can kind of connect to our ancestral lineage.
Mhm.
If we're from lands that have a written story, history. But then, where my mind kind of goes with that is that we're currently on like Australian, Indigenous land
Mm.
here, and that for myself at least, I don't have Australian Indigenous blood, and also traditionally this culture is not a written culture either, and so the stories are like in the land, and it's I was talking to someone the other day, and they were going to somewhere that I was fairly familiar with some of the bad stories that have happened, and I said, it's really good for you to be aware before arriving to this place, like some of the traumas that have happened there, and some of the and to pay like respects to that and to be aware of that when you're walking on those lands.
Mm.
And so just when you're talking about stories, and I have that just like awareness that I walk on all these different lands around Australia, and I don't know a lot of the stories, and I
Mm.
don't know where to learn it, and I
Mm.
feel like if I knew more of those stories, then it might create a different relation with the trees and the
Mm.
stones and the
Mm.
waters. Having that historical understanding, not just historical as in something in the past,
Mm.
because that dream time, those stories are still alive right now,
Mm.
and always will be. But it's just kind of, there's maybe like a veil
Mm.
of ignorance, or not of illusion of disconnect,
Mm.
as you
Mm.
put it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that just you got me pondering on.
Mm. Yeah. I Martin
Yeah.
Shaw. Do you know Martin Shaw? He's an amazing storyteller. He's Welsh from Dartmoor. And I heard him once speaking about like bartering a relationship between the stories of your lineage and the land that you're on. And I always thought that was so beautiful because, like, I don't know, the land is kind of a story. And I have some like complicated feelings about like accessing the traditional stories of this land. And I just feel like they're kind of not mine, you know. I have stories that are from my
Yep.
Egyptian lineage. And I think sometimes we get this idea that, like, oh,
Mm.
those stories aren't from this land, so you can't say them or whatever it is. But Martin Shaw talked about, like, you know, he took one of the stories, he'd take one of the stories from his lineage and take them to a particular piece of land and speak that story and kind of allow that story, whether it was like the way the wind was blowing, how cold it was, what the ground was like beneath his feet. And there would be a bartering, a relationship, a dialogue between like the land and how the land was influencing the
Mm.
telling of that story from his lineage. Because the new is always being created, right? I think we have this like romanticized idea that we can just like bring back the past, which we can't, right? And I love this idea of the newness
Mm.
that was being created from a meeting of the story of his lineage with like the terrain, and how the terrain was influencing the shape and the telling and the transmission of that story. So I like that idea as well.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, wow. Yeah, there's so much in that. I love that barter and that
Mm,
exchange and that ever evolving landscape and
mhm,
our contributions that we bring. And a
mm,
couple of things come to mind for a start. You know, a friend of mine that lives just kind of down the road and beneath this like incredible rock formation. You know, he said to me the indigenous name of this rock formation, um, and that he was talking about like the songs, the traditional songs of that land, how it's like the songs are shaped by the land. Like if you actually like listen to a
mm,
song that comes from a certain place,
mhm,
you can almost like see it in the way that the mountains form and the
mhm.
trees. Like it's like that's how the song
Exactly.
kind of formation
Mhm,
goes. Like the way that like the patternings of the song like match to the patternings of the land, and quite a almost like physical and audible kind of way.
mhm. Exactly.
And it got me thinking about how then like land's always shifting, it's always shifting, changing with the weathers and and just with all the different kind of environmental factors. Things are always shifting and changing, and songs and stories are always
Mm,
evolving.
mm,
And and that's something that like since I've been moved down here like a year ago, like I still am forming that understanding of this land and the relation. And so at the start of all of my workshops, I as my kind of acknowledgement and paying respects, I just really speak about how I don't, my ancestors don't originally come from here. I've been here a few generations, but I don't come, I've been in Australia for a few generations, but I'm new to this area. And that all I can hope is that by the kind of medicine spaces that I'm creating, I can only hope to be part of the healing and, weaving in to not wanting to barge in,
mm,
and also not wanting to like demand to know anything, to
mm,
like be like I have a right to know the stories here,
mm,
or
mm,
just like letting them come when they want to present themselves, but
mm,
also just like being mindful of, well, what story am I bringing to the
mm,
land, like what impact am I having, but also like energetically, like in the patterning, in
mhm,
the like in the medicine space, in the education.
mm.
Yeah, it's like what am I bringing here, because that's all getting woven into
Totally.
what's already here. So that
Absolutely.
mindfulness
Mhm.
is about all that I can really bring.
Yeah, and the newness and the healing that comes from
Yeah.
the telling of a new story that emerges when you are in relationship with the land, like what you said, not with like projecting your story onto it, but when you are in relationship with the
Mm.
land and allowing it to speak and allowing it to impress upon you and allowing it to shape you and your movements and your stories here. I think yeah, we're always creating
Mm.
a new story, but again, it comes back to that relationship, and is that story rooted in relationship? um, because again, relationship is what it is to be well, or a huge part of what it is to be well.
Mm. Have you heard the Emerald podcast?
Yeah.
Have you heard the Emerald
Yeah,
podcast?
man.
Yeah. So like, yeah, you've probably heard
So
like
good.
Josh's episode that like inanimate objects aren't inanimate, I think is the name of this. I'll
Hmm.
put it in the show notes,
Yeah, great.
but for the listeners. But yeah, it just definitely goes very eloquently into a lot of the things that we're kind of touching on in
Man,
this
listening to
part
that
of the chat.
podcast is
Um,
like, it's like taking mushrooms. I have so much respect for the way that he, it really reveals to me like what he does is like art, and the way that words can influence like your view of the world and shift you into a different mode of perception. I think that's why I love stories as well,
Mm-hmm.
because words are
Mm.
so powerful. And often I'll listen to one of those podcasts, and the way that he's woven his words with the music, I leave in like a slightly altered state at the end of, listening to something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And for me, again, because he's storytelling, it's information, but it's art, and information as art is storytelling, and and yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the profound impact of stories and words, and how that they can take you into an altered state is for me. I love that podcast.
Yeah, words are so powerful. Like you
Mm,
think about it, like you spell a word. Like
exactly.
words are spells. Like
Spells.
we're casting spells, and a
Totally.
lot of us are just kind of mindlessly
Hmm.
kind of stumbling around just saying all this stuff, like not even knowing what spells we're casting because we don't
Exactly.
know the root meaning of the words or the
Yeah.
history of our language
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah, that's why one of the things I love about, I'm a little bit of a botanical geek, and I love I won't remember the name of people, but I'm really good at remembering the botanical names of
Hmm.
plants.
Hmm.
And I love pulling it apart. Like you look at
Mm.
it's all Latin, mostly Latin, and
So much Greek
tons of
as
Greek and
well.
that, and it's
Yeah.
like, when you're kind of pulling it apart, yeah, and a lot of that's like the roots of our language as well. So I
Exactly.
love, through learning botanical talk, I learn about
Mm.
language and have more awareness and mindfulness about what I'm saying and what it actually really means. And
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, there's like
Yeah.
a whole rabbit hole right there, really.
Totally. Words make worlds. And one thing that I'm really fascinated with is like at least in clinic, especially when clinics are really vulnerable place. People are coming to you like very unwell, very much wanting to be better, very much like bearing their soul and all their wounds. And I think like not enough attention is paid to like the words that we use in clinic, because they literally can cast a spell, especially in clinic is a sacred space in so many ways, and they can cast a spell. And I think wellness is
Hmm.
so focused on like, what's wrong with you? What is your deficit? What are you missing? Even like, for example, I heard someone speaking
Hmm.
about like when you're looking at somebody's blood test, you're like, this is wrong. You haven't got enough of this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. And like, what if we just shifted to like, this is what you're doing great. This is what you've got loads of. What resources do you already have? Like,
Yeah.
where's the joy and pleasure and beauty in your life? Like, these are the things you're doing right. Like, we focus so much on what is the matter and not enough, I believe, on what matters. And in such a vulnerable place, such as in clinic or in
Mm.
any interaction where you're supporting someone's health, viewing the body in a deficit state actually, I think, can have quite an impact on their health outcomes. And, the words that come out of viewing a
Mm.
body in a deficit state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. What is the matter versus what matters?
Yeah, I
That's
learned that.
great.
That was I learned that
Yeah.
from Jimmy. That was, it was very cool to see him work in that in that sort of space, and the words that he used to help shift people's perceptions of, what was going on and what was possible.
Mm. Wonderful. Well, the Root Network space, because you've got a wait list, right? Like people can't just jump in.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that might
Or
change next year. I'm thinking about it. It might change next year. When I do the next intake, I might just leave it open. I'll see. But right now, as I'm about to move house and just there's a lot going on, yeah, there's a wait list. So if people want to join, you can go to my Instagram and jump on the wait list there. And we'll have an opening likely around
yeah.
March, April next year. Yeah.
Great. I'll put for the listeners, I'll put that all in the show notes. I'll put all the links so that you can find out more and
Thanks.
practitioners can sign up there. But there's also other offerings that you have, right? I was looking at through your website, like what are other ways that people can learn from you or with you and or engage with you?
Yeah, look, basically, I put a lot out on social media, particularly within this space of like changing the wellness paradigm, subverting some of the narratives that we have in wellness culture, excavating the narratives that we don't know that are there, that lie beneath the surface of industrialized wellness. So there's a good bit of information there. I do have a newsletter as well called Root Words. Again, that's like signifying my love for words, where every 2 weeks you get an email just exploring a lot of the things that we've spoken about today. Um, and as for other offerings, I do see clients one on one, although I'm about to go take a break. But for clinical herbal medicine, I'm hoping to have a few more things out next year for non qualified herbalists, naturopaths, and nutritionists, because I'm really passionate, obviously, about expanding that conversation further and making it accessible to everybody. But right
Mm.
now I don't have any other offerings. I've got a free audio series actually accessible again via my Instagram called Rewrite Wellness, which actually again excavates those wellness narratives and
Mm.
helps us to write new ones that are more rooted in an equitable, compassionate, considerate kind of form of wellness. um, yeah, I think that's about it at the moment.
Beautiful. And yeah, you got a big move ahead of you, moving to sunny coast.
Yeah, moving to the sunny coast to the
We're gonna be
sunshine.
lucky to have you up there.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Like I was saying to you before, I lived up there for 6 years. Oh yeah, that's where my whole journey started, really, on top of a mountain in a little shack. And I
Mm.
have lots of community there, and I'm very, very excited to get back to that community.
Oh, beautiful. So it's kind of coming full circle in a way there.
Uh huh.
Kat and Heidi are going to be lucky to have you up
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Cats in the Root Network, so very exciting to, yeah. Again, just be around,
Yeah.
be around.
Yeah, I think it was Kat that actually initially told me about it. It actually, in a fortnight period, I had 4 different people contact me
Oh,
and be like, "Have you heard about the Root Network? Oh my God, this
that's
woman,
cool.
Miriam, you got to check out what she's up to."
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's nice to finally get to meet you and have a chat. And feel like we could talk for days about all of this, but I think we're probably gonna kind of wrap it up here. But any parting words for our listeners? Anything maybe that we didn't quite get into or that is
Oh,
burning on your tongue that you feel to share?
I just want to reiterate that phrase, stitching ourselves back in. And that can be done in really like small and simple ways as well. And that, sometimes we can get like so concerned in our wellness is like, are we hitting our protein goals? Am I doing like XYZ? Am I detoxing enough? Am I doing this thing? And all that stuff is important. But I would really like to remind people that expanding our definition of what it means to be well and taking that beyond like what we consume, like redefining wellness not in terms of consumption but in terms of relationship, which is free and available to us at any time. And what I believe is like the big picture container that helps influence our well-being, again in the truest and deepest sense of the word, is to stitch ourselves back in to the living, breathing, animate world, to each other, and to some of the bigger systems and structures that that we are a part of.
So beautifully put. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and your stories with
Thank you
us.
so much for
Great to have
having
you
me.
back
It's
on the
been so
show, and
fun.
yeah, yeah. Wishing you all the best with your move.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Herbal Education segment of the Elder Tree podcast. Stay tuned every new moon as I interview more wise and inspiring herbal educators and herbal lore keepers from around Australia. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey, you can become a member of the Elder Tree Trove on Patreon. Contribute as little as $2 per week to access free content from our interviewees and also access discount codes and opportunities which are exclusive to our members. You can find us on Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/The Elder Tree. Other ways that you can assist us in getting our offerings out there to more people in Australia is by subscribing and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify app. Also, liking, commenting on and sharing our social media posts actually has a really positive impact and helps us to reach further with the message from all of the amazing herbal law keepers that we interview on this podcast. Thank you so much for your support and have a most wonderful day.